The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the general store in Tahlequah, Cherokee Nation in Indian Territory, and Zara Navarro stepped down onto the dusty street with nothing but a carpetbag and bruises hidden beneath her long sleeves that told stories she never wanted to speak aloud. The year was 1884, and summer hung heavy in the air like a weighted blanket, the kind that made breathing feel like work. Zara's dark hair clung to her neck in damp tendrils, and her brown eyes scanned the unfamiliar town with the wariness of a deer that had learned every shadow might hold a predator. She had traveled from Santa Fe, leaving behind a husband whose fist spoke louder than his words ever could, and she had no intention of ever going back. The general store's door stood open, and she could see the dim interior promising shade and perhaps some small measure of peace. She climbed the wooden steps carefully, favoring her left side where her ribs still ached from the last time Marcus had decided she had looked at another man wrong. She had not looked at anyone. She never did. But Marcus saw threats in every corner, and Zara had paid the price for his imagination. Inside, the store smelled of tobacco, coffee, and leather. A Cherokee woman stood behind the counter, her dark eyes kind and knowing in a way that made Zara want to both run and weep. She had grown so unused to kindness that it struck her as foreign now, something from a language she had once spoken but could no longer quite remember. "Can I help you, child?" the woman asked, and her voice was gentle. "I need a room," Zara said, and her voice came out rougher than she intended. "Is there a boarding house in town?" "There is. Mrs. Patterson runs a place 2 streets over. Clean rooms, good food, no trouble allowed." The woman paused, studying Zara with eyes that seemed to see past the carefully buttoned collar and the forced steadiness. "You running from something or running to something?" Zara's throat tightened. "Does it matter?" "Might do. Tahlequah is a good town, but it is also a place where people ask questions. The Cherokee Nation has its own laws, and we look after our own here. If you are in trouble, there are people who will help." "I just need a room and maybe some work," Zara said quietly. "I can sew, I can cook, I am good with numbers." The woman nodded slowly. "I am Nancy Swimmer. My husband and I run this store. We could use some help with the bookkeeping. The store does good business, but neither of us has much patience for ledgers." She reached under the counter and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. "You look like you have not eaten today. Take this. No charge." Zara's eyes burned with unexpected tears. She had not cried when Marcus hit her, had not cried during the long stagecoach journey, but this simple act of generosity cracked something inside her chest. She took the sandwich with trembling fingers. "Thank you. Go on to Mrs. Patterson's. Tell her Nancy sent you. Come back tomorrow if you want to talk about the bookkeeping work." Nancy's expression softened further. "And child, whatever you left behind, you do not have to carry it on your face. This is a new place. You can be new here too." Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and left the store with the sandwich clutched in her hand like a talisman. The boarding house was easy to find. A large white building with a wide porch and rocking chairs that looked like they had held 1,000 conversations. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a brisk Scottish woman with red hair going gray and a no-nonsense manner that somehow still managed to be warm. "Nancy Swimmer sent you?" Mrs. Patterson asked, looking Zara up and down with sharp blue eyes. "Then you are welcome here. I have a room on the 2nd floor, faces east so you get the morning sun. $3 a week includes breakfast and supper. No men allowed upstairs, no drinking, no fighting." "That sounds perfect," Zara said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. No fighting. She could live with that rule. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the main street. Zara set down her carpetbag and sank onto the bed, feeling the tension that had held her upright for weeks suddenly release. She lay back and stared at the ceiling, eating Nancy's sandwich slowly, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt something that might have been the distant cousin of hope. She did not notice the man on horseback who rode past the boarding house just then, a tall figure in worn denim and a black hat, his face shadowed but his posture speaking of a bone-deep weariness that matched her own. Cade Irving had been riding for 2 days straight, coming back to Tahlequah from a cattle drive that had taken him all the way to Kansas. He was tired in a way that went beyond the physical, the kind of tired that came from too many years of the same endless routine. He was 31 years old, and sometimes he felt ancient. His ranch sat on land he leased from the Cherokee Nation, a small spread that he worked mostly by himself with occasional help from day laborers. It was honest work, hard work, and it left him too exhausted most nights to think about the fact that he went home to an empty house, and had done so for longer than he cared to count. He had loved once, or thought he had, but Sarah had decided that being a rancher's wife in Indian Territory was not the life she wanted. She had left for St. Louis 5 years ago, and Cade had signed the divorce papers without argument. He had not blamed her. The life was hard. But it had left him cautious, careful with his heart in ways he had not been before. He guided his horse, a sturdy sorrel named Rusty, toward the livery stable, then walked the few blocks to the general store to pick up supplies. Nancy Swimmer greeted him with a smile. "Cade Irving back from the trail. You look half dead." "Feel about 3/4 dead," Cade admitted, managing a tired smile. "Need to stock up before I head back to the ranch. How have things been here?" "Quiet, mostly. We hired someone to help with the books starting tomorrow." A young woman new in town. Seemed like she needed the work. Cade nodded, only half listening as he began gathering items. Coffee, flour, sugar, salt, beans, bacon. The staples that would keep him fed for the next month. "That is good. You and John needed the help." "You need help too," Nancy said pointedly. "That ranch is too much for one man. I manage." Managing is not the same as living, Cade. He did not have an answer for that, so he just paid for his supplies and headed back out into the heat. He would spend one night at the boarding house himself, he decided. He was too tired to make the ride out to the ranch tonight. Tomorrow would be soon enough. That was how Zara and Cade first crossed paths, though neither of them knew it yet. They sat at the same long table in Mrs. Patterson's dining room that evening, but at opposite ends, Zara keeping her eyes on her plate while Cade ate in exhausted silence. Mrs. Patterson served pot roast and potatoes, green beans cooked with bacon, and biscuits that melted on the tongue. Zara ate slowly, savoring each bite, still not quite believing that she was here, that she was safe, that no one was going to grab her wrist and twist until she cried out. She went to bed early, and for the first night in recent memory, she slept without nightmares. Morning came soft and golden, and Zara washed her face in the basin, braided her hair, and put on her best dress, which was not saying much. It was dark blue calico, mended in places but clean and pressed. She went down to breakfast, and this time she allowed herself to look around the dining room. There were 4 other boarders. An older gentleman who Nancy had mentioned was a clerk for the Cherokee Nation government. 2 women who worked as school teachers, and the cowboy from last night, who looked slightly more human after a night's sleep. He caught her looking and nodded politely. Zara quickly dropped her gaze, her heart hammering. She was not afraid of him specifically, but she was afraid of the fact that she had looked, afraid of what that might mean, afraid that Marcus had trained her so well that even a simple glance felt like a betrayal. But Marcus was not here. Marcus would never be here. She had to remember that, after breakfast, she walked to the general store. Nancy was already there, sweeping the front steps. "Good morning, Zara. Ready to take a look at those ledgers?" "Yes, madam." The books were indeed in disarray, but it was the kind of disarray that came from busy people trying their best, not from neglect. Zara settled at a small desk in the back room and began sorting through receipts and invoices, her mind easing into the familiar rhythm of numbers. Numbers made sense. Numbers had rules. Numbers did not hit you if you made a mistake, they just waited patiently for you to correct them. She worked through the morning, and Nancy brought her coffee and a sweet roll at mid-morning. "You are good at this. I can already tell. I like it," Zara admitted. "It is peaceful. What brought you to Tahlequah, if you do not mind my asking? You do not have to answer." Zara hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. "I needed to leave where I was. I had heard the Cherokee Nation was a good place, that the laws were fair." Nancy nodded slowly. "We have our own government here, our own courts. The Cherokee people have been through much, but we have built something strong. And yes, the laws are fair. If someone wrongs you, there is justice to be had." She paused. "I do not mean to pry, but if you need help, legal or otherwise, my husband John knows people." "Thank you," Zara said softly. "I will remember that." The cowboy came into the store around noon, looking more alert than he had at breakfast. He tipped his hat to Nancy. "Morning. Cade, this is Zara Navarro. She is helping us with the bookkeeping. Zara, this is Cade Irving. He has a ranch north of town." Cade's eyes were gray, Zara noticed, like the sky before a storm. They were also kind, which surprised her. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Navarro." "Mr. Irving," she said quietly, and returned her attention to the ledgers, trying to ignore the way her hands wanted to shake. Cade bought a few more items, chatted briefly with Nancy about cattle prices, and then left. He did not know why the woman with the dark eyes and the careful movements had made such an impression on him, but he found himself thinking about her as he rode back to his ranch. There had been something fragile about her, but also something strong, like a tree that had bent in a storm but not broken. He shook his head, trying to clear the thought. He did not need to be thinking about a woman he had just met, especially one who looked like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. He had enough to deal with on his own. The ranch greeted him with the usual chorus of needs. Fences to mend, horses to tend, 100 small tasks that had piled up during his absence. He threw himself into the work, and by the time evening fell, he was tired enough to eat a quick meal of beans and cornbread before collapsing into bed. Days passed, then weeks. Zara settled into a rhythm. She worked at the general store 3 days a week, keeping the books in order and helping Nancy with customers when needed. She was quiet and efficient, and people began to know her by sight. The new woman with the sad eyes who never smiled but was always polite. She kept to herself, attending church on Sundays but sitting in the back and leaving quickly afterward. Mrs. Patterson worried about her a bit, but respected her privacy. Cade came into town every week or so for supplies. He always nodded to Zara, and she always nodded back, and that was the extent of their interaction. But Nancy Swimmer, who had eyes like a hawk and a romantic heart, despite her practical exterior, noticed the way Cade's gaze lingered just a moment longer than necessary, and the way Zara's shoulders seemed to relax slightly when he left the store, as if she had been holding tension she had not even known was there. One day in late August, a man came into the store asking questions. He was well dressed, with slicked back hair and cold eyes, and he wanted to know if anyone had seen a woman matching Zara's description. Nancy, who had suspected something like this might happen, said she had not seen anyone like that. The man left, but Nancy immediately went to the back room where Zara was working. "There is a man asking about you," she said without preamble. I sent him away, but you should know. The color drained from Zara's face. What did he look like? Nancy described him, and Zara shook her head. That is not Marcus, but it might be someone he sent. He would not come himself. He always has others do his work. She stood abruptly, her hands trembling. I should leave. I do not want to bring trouble to you. Sit down, Nancy said firmly. You are not bringing us trouble, he is, and we do not let bullies win here. She paused. My husband is friends with the Cherokee marshals. Let me talk to him. If this man is looking for you, we need to know why and what we can do about it. He is my husband, Zara said, the words bitter in her mouth. I left him. He will say I stole from him or something similar. He will lie. Did you steal from him? No. I took only what was mine, what I had brought to the marriage. He stole from me 3 years of my life, my peace, my sense of safety. Zara's voice broke. I cannot go back, Mrs. Swimmer. I will not. You will not have to, Nancy said, and her voice was steel. Let me handle this. That evening, John Swimmer spoke with several Cherokee marshals, explaining the situation. The Cherokee Nation had seen plenty of people fleeing from various troubles, and they had developed ways of handling such things. If Zara was legally married, the situation was complicated, but not impossible. The man asking questions was not law enforcement, which meant he had no authority in Cherokee territory. And if he caused trouble, he would find himself facing Cherokee justice, which was swift and not particularly sympathetic to men who terrorized women. Word spread quietly through the community, the way it did in small towns. Zara Navarro was under protection. Anyone giving information about her to strangers would find themselves unwelcome in many establishments. Cade heard about it from the blacksmith when he came into town to get his horse reshod. That new woman at the general store, someone is looking for her. Nancy Swimmer says it is an abusive husband. Marshals are keeping an eye out. Cade felt a surge of anger that surprised him with its intensity. He barely knew Zara Navarro, but the thought of someone hunting her, frightening her, made his blood run hot. Is she safe? For now. Nancy and John are looking after her, but you know how these things go. If the man is determined, he might cause trouble. Cade nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. Tell Nancy I want to talk to her when she has a moment. The next day, he rode into town and found Nancy in the store. Zara was in the back room working on the books. Nancy gave him a knowing look. Cade Irving, what brings you here mid-week? I heard about Miss Navarro's situation. Did you now? Nancy's expression was carefully neutral. I have an idea. It might be presumptuous, but hear me out. Cade took off his hat and turned it in his hands, a gesture of nervousness that was unlike him. My ranch is about an hour outside of town. It is remote. If Miss Navarro needed a place to stay where someone would not think to look, she could work as my housekeeper. I have been needing help with the cooking and cleaning, and Lord knows I can barely keep the place from falling down around my ears. She would have her own room, and I would pay fair wages. It would give her some distance from town if this man comes back. Nancy studied him for a long moment. That is generous of you, Cade, but I need to know your intentions are honorable. They are, he said immediately. I am not looking for anything beyond giving someone a safe place to land. My marriage ended because Sarah wanted a different life, not because I treated her poorly. You can ask anyone who knew us. I know your character, Cade. I just needed to hear you say it. Nancy paused. Let me talk to Zara. It should be her choice. When Nancy brought up the idea, Zara's first instinct was to refuse. The thought of being alone on a ranch with a man she barely knew terrified her. But then she thought about Marcus, about the man who was looking for her, about how exposed she felt in town where anyone could find her. At least on a ranch, she would see someone coming from a distance. "I do not know," she said slowly. "I appreciate Mr. Irving's offer, but I am not sure I can." "I understand your hesitation," Nancy said gently. "But Cade is a good man. He would not harm you, and you would not be trapped there. You would have the wagon to drive into town whenever you needed. It would just be a place to stay, a place to work, until this situation resolves itself." "What if it never resolves itself?" Zara asked, and her voice was small. "Then you will still have a safe place to live and work you can be proud of. But I believe it will resolve one way or another. Men like your husband, they are bullies. When bullies realize they cannot win, they usually move on to easier targets." Nancy reached out and took Zara's hand. "You deserve to feel safe, child. Let us help you." Zara agreed finally, though her stomach churned with anxiety. 2 days later, Cade drove a wagon into town to collect her and her few belongings. He was polite and distant, keeping a careful space between them, and Zara appreciated that more than she could say. The ride to the ranch took them through rolling hills covered in prairie grass, past groves of oak and hickory, and along a creek that glittered in the afternoon sun. It was beautiful country, wild and open, and Zara found herself breathing easier with every mile they put between themselves and town. "It is not much," Cade said as they approached the ranch. "Just a house, a barn, a few outbuildings. I run about 200 head of cattle, and I have half a dozen horses. It keeps me busy." The house was a sturdy log structure with a stone chimney and a covered porch. It was not fancy, but it looked solid and well maintained. Inside, Zara found a main room that served as kitchen and living space, 2 bedrooms and a loft. It was dusty and cluttered with the detritus of a man who spent more time outdoors than in, but it had good bones. "Your room is here," Cade said, opening the door to one of the bedrooms. It had a bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the creek. "I am in the other room, and I will be spending most of my time out working anyway. You will have privacy." "Thank you," Zara said quietly. "I will earn my keep, Mr. Irving, I promise." "I am sure you will, and call me Cade. Mr. Irving makes me feel like I should be wearing a suit." He gave her a small smile. "There is food in the pantry, such as it is. Make yourself at home. If you need anything, just holler. I will be out in the barn." He left, and Zara stood in the middle of the main room feeling unmoored. This was her life now, at least for the time being. She was living on a ranch with a cowboy she barely knew, miles from town, and she should have been terrified. But instead, she felt a strange sense of calm. Cade Irving had not touched her, had not stood too close, had not raised his voice or made demands. He had simply offered her a place and then stepped back, giving her room to breathe. She set to work cleaning the house, needing something to do with her hands. By the time evening fell, the main room was swept and dusted. The dishes were washed, and she had found enough supplies to make a simple supper of fried salt pork, beans, and skillet cornbread. She called Cade in when it was ready, and they sat at the rough wooden table and ate in silence that was not quite comfortable but not hostile either. "This is good," Cade said finally. "Thank you. It is just simple food. Simple food cooked well is better than fancy food cooked poorly." He paused. "I want you to know, Miss Navarro, that you do not have to be afraid here. I know you do not know me well enough to trust that yet, but I hope in time you will see I mean what I say." Zara looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time since they had arrived at the ranch. What she saw there was sincerity and something else she could not quite name. Not pity, but perhaps understanding. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You do not know me. Why would you take in a stranger?" Cade considered the question. "Because someone should have done it for my mother," he said finally. "She died when I was 12. My father used to hit her, and no one ever stepped in. I was too young to stop him. After she died, he drank himself to death within a year. I have spent my life wishing someone had helped her, had given her a way out. Maybe if I can help you, it balances the scales somehow." The raw honesty of it struck Zara silent. She had expected him to say something noble or generic, but this was real pain, shared openly. "I am sorry," she said softly, "for your mother and for you. It was a long time ago, but it leaves a mark, you know. Those things always do." "Yes," Zara agreed. "They do." They did not talk much more that evening. Cade showed her where everything was, explained his routines, and then excused himself to his room. Zara sat on the porch for a while, listening to the night sounds, the chirp of crickets, the distant call of an owl, the soft lowing of cattle settling down for the night. The sky was a riot of stars, more than she had ever seen in Santa Fe, and she felt very small beneath them, but not in a bad way. Inside, she lay down on the bed in her room and pulled the quilt up to her chin. The sheets smelled of lavender and sunshine, and she wondered if Cade had washed them in preparation for her arrival. The thought made her throat tight. She fell asleep to the sound of the wind in the trees and did not dream at all. The days developed a rhythm. Zara woke early, made breakfast for herself and Cade, and then set about the business of keeping the house. There was plenty to do. Years of bachelor living had left the place functional but neglected. She washed curtains and beat rugs, scrubbed floors and polished the few pieces of furniture until they gleamed. She mended clothes and organized the pantry, and even started a small kitchen garden near the house, planting late summer vegetables that might still have time to produce before the frost. Cade worked from sunup to sundown and often beyond. He was good at what he did, and Zara would watch sometimes from the kitchen window as he worked with the horses, his movements patient and sure. He never forced an animal, never lost his temper. He just waited, and eventually the horse would come to him, would trust him. She began to understand that this was simply who he was. A man who did not rush, who did not demand. When he spoke to her, it was with courtesy and respect. When he needed something, he asked, never commanded. And when she needed space, he gave it without question. One morning, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Zara came out of her room to find Cade already in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked startled to see her. "I am sorry. I did not mean to intrude. I usually get up earlier than this, but I overslept." "You are not intruding. This is your house." Zara moved to the stove. "Let me make breakfast." "You do not have to wait on me," Cade said. "I can make my own breakfast." "I know I do not have to. I want to." She paused, trying to find the words. "You have given me a place where I feel safe. That is worth more than cooking a few meals." Cade nodded slowly. "All right then. Thank you." They ate together, scrambled eggs and bacon and biscuits with butter and jam that Zara had found in the pantry. The silence between them was easier now, companionable rather than awkward. After breakfast, Cade headed out to work on the fence line in the north pasture, and Zara cleaned up the kitchen before settling down to tackle a pile of mending. She was sewing a button back onto one of Cade's shirts when she realized she was humming. The recognition stopped her cold. She had not hummed in years. Marcus had not liked it, had said it annoyed him, and she had learned to keep silent. But here, in this house with no one to criticize or find fault, she had started humming without even thinking about it. The realization made her eyes sting with tears. She was starting to heal. Slowly, carefully, like a bone knitting back together, but healing nonetheless. That evening, Cade came in covered in dust and sweat. "I am going to wash up at the pump before I come in properly," he said. "I am filthy." "There is a clean towel on the porch," Zara said, and then, on impulse, "I could heat water for a bath if you like. There is a tub in the barn, is there not?" Cade looked surprised. There is, but you do not have to go to that trouble. It is not trouble. Everyone deserves a hot bath now and then. So Zara heated water on the stove and helped Cade haul the tub into the small room off the kitchen that served as a washroom. She filled it bucket by bucket, and when it was ready, she retreated to give him privacy. She heard him sink into the water with a groan of relief, and she smiled to herself as she started preparing supper. This, she thought, was what a home should feel like. Not a place of fear and walking on eggshells, but a place where people took care of each other without keeping score, where kindness was the default rather than the exception. When Cade emerged, his hair damp and his face relaxed in a way she had never seen, he caught her eye and smiled. "Thank you for that. I did not realize how much I needed it." "You work hard," Zara said simply. "You deserve to feel human at the end of the day." They ate supper, and afterward Cade asked if she played checkers. She did not, so he taught her, and they spent the evening by lamplight, the game board between them. Zara was not very good at first, but Cade was patient, explaining strategies without making her feel foolish. By the third game, she managed to beat him, and his surprised laugh was the best sound she had heard in a long time. "You are a quick study," he said, grinning. "I had a good teacher. It became a routine." After supper, if there was time, they would play checkers or Cade would read aloud from one of the few books he owned while Zara sewed or knitted. Sometimes they just talked, sharing bits and pieces of their lives. Zara learned that Cade had been born in Texas, that his father had moved them to Indian Territory after his mother died, hoping for a fresh start that never quite materialized. Cade had started working on ranches when he was 14, learning everything he could, and had saved for years to lease his own land and start his own herd. In turn, Zara shared carefully edited versions of her own story. She had grown up in Santa Fe, the youngest of 4 daughters. Her father had been a merchant, successful enough to provide well for his family. She had married Marcus Navarro when she was 19, believing his charm and his promises of a good life. The reality had been different. She did not go into details, and Cade did not push, but he could see the shadows in her eyes when she spoke of those years. "You think he will keep looking for you?" Cade asked one evening. "I do not know. Marcus is proud. He will not like that I left, that I made him look bad. But he is also lazy. If it becomes too difficult, if it costs too much or takes too much effort, he will move on." Zara set down her sewing and looked at Cade directly. "I am more afraid of the man I might become if I go back. I was starting to disappear, to become this silent ghost who just tried to avoid being hit. I do not want to be that person." "You are not that person," Cade said firmly. "You are someone who had the courage to leave, to start over. That takes strength." "It took desperation," Zara corrected. "I was not strong, I was terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid." Cade leaned forward, his expression earnest. "You are stronger than you think, Zara." The use of her first name, the sincerity in his voice, made something warm unfurl in Zara's chest. She had been so cold for so long, and Cade was like a fire she could warm herself by without fear of being burned. Summer turned to autumn, and the days grew shorter and cooler. Zara's garden produced a surprising bounty, and she spent several days preserving vegetables and making pickles and relish. Cade brought in a deer from a hunting trip, and Zara cut it up and preserved the meat, rendering the fat for tallow and making use of every part of the animal. They worked well together, she realized. She would help him with outdoor tasks when he needed an extra pair of hands, and he would help her with the heavier work around the house. They had fallen into an easy partnership that felt natural and right. One day in early October, Cade came in from checking the cattle with a troubled expression. "Storm coming," he said. "A bad one from the looks of those clouds. We might be in for an early winter." The storm hit that night, a howling wind that rattled the windows and drove rain against the walls like handfuls of thrown stones. Zara woke to thunder that sounded like the world splitting open and lightning that turned the darkness into brief, stark daylight. She lay in bed, listening to the storm rage, and tried not to be afraid. Then she heard a crash from outside, and a moment later Cade was knocking on her door. "Zara, the barn door came loose. I need to go secure it before the horses panic." She was up immediately, pulling on a shawl over her nightgown. "I will help. You do not have to. I know." They ran out into the storm together, the rain soaking them within seconds. The barn door was indeed hanging loose, banging against the wall with each gust of wind. The horses inside were stamping and snorting, eyes rolling white with fear. Zara went to calm them while Cade wrestled the door back into place and secured it with rope. By the time they made it back to the house, they were both drenched and shivering. Zara's hair hung in wet ropes down her back, and Cade's shirt was plastered to his body. They stood in the kitchen, dripping onto the floor, and then Cade started to laugh. "What?" Zara asked, but she was smiling too. "We look like drowned rats," Cade said, and his laughter was infectious. Zara found herself laughing too, really laughing for the first time in longer than she could remember. It felt good, like releasing something that had been bottled up too long. "We should change before we catch our deaths," she said finally. They retreated to their respective rooms to change into dry clothes, and Zara toweled her hair as dry as she could. When she emerged, Cade had a fire going in the fireplace and was hanging their wet things nearby to dry. He had made coffee, and he handed her a cup. "To surviving storms," he said, raising his own cup. "To surviving storms," Zara echoed, and their eyes met over the rims of their coffee cups. Something shifted in that moment, a recognition that passed between them without words. They were both survivors, both people who had weathered storms of different kinds and come through battered but not broken. And maybe, just maybe, they did not have to weather the next storm alone. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Cade went out early to assess the damage and came back with a grim expression. "Lost part of the chicken coop roof and the creek flooded its banks. We are going to need to move the cattle to higher ground." "What can I do to help?" Zara asked immediately. "Can you ride?" "I can." "Then saddle up. I will need you to help herd them." They spent the day on horseback, rounding up cattle and moving them to higher pastures. It was hard work, and Zara was not used to spending so many hours in the saddle, but she pushed through the discomfort. Cade was patient with her, showing her how to anticipate the cattle's movements, how to use her horse's body to guide rather than chase. By the time they made it back to the house, it was nearly dark, and Zara was so tired she could barely stand. Cade helped her down from her horse, his hands steady on her waist, and for a moment they stood very close, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body against the evening chill. "You did good today," he said softly. "Real good. Thank you for teaching me." They stood there a moment longer, and Zara felt a pull toward him that was both terrifying and exhilarating. She wanted to lean into him, to feel his arms around her, to know what it was like to be held by someone who would never hurt her. But she was not ready, not yet, and some part of her thought maybe she never would be. Cade seemed to sense her hesitation, and he stepped back, breaking the moment. "Let us get these horses taken care of and find some supper. I am hungry enough to eat a whole steer." The moment passed, but it left something in its wake, a new awareness that hummed between them like a plucked string. As October rolled on, Zara found herself thinking about Cade more and more. She noticed little things about him. The way he always made sure she had the best piece of meat at supper. The way he fixed the squeaky hinge on her bedroom door without being asked. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, like what she had to say mattered. She also noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention. There was something tender in his expression, something that made her heart skip in a way that was not entirely unpleasant. She was falling in love with him, she realized one day while kneading bread dough. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it felt like a revelation, like discovering that the sun would rise again after a long, dark night. She was falling in love with Cade Irving, with his quiet strength and his patient kindness, and the way he had given her space to heal without ever making her feel like a burden. The question was, what was she going to do about it? The answer came on a cold November afternoon. Zara had driven the wagon into Tahlequah to pick up supplies and visit with Nancy Swimmer. She was in the general store, going over the latest inventory, when a man walked in. He was well-dressed, with dark hair and calculating eyes, and Zara's blood turned to ice. It was not Marcus, but it was his brother Tomas, and he was looking right at her. "Zara," he said, his voice falsely warm, "what a surprise to find you here." Nancy Swimmer stepped forward immediately, her expression hard. "Can I help you, sir?" "I am just here to speak with my sister-in-law," Tomas said smoothly. "Family business." "I have nothing to say to you," Zara said, her voice shaking but steady. "Leave me alone. Marcus wants you to come home. He misses you. No, he is willing to forgive you for running off. He understands you were upset." "Upset?" Zara felt anger rising, hot and righteous. "He beat me. He controlled every aspect of my life. I am not upset, Tomas. I am free, and I am not going back." Tomas's expression hardened. "You are still his wife. You belong to him." "I belong to myself," Zara said, and she believed it, felt the truth of it in her bones. "Now leave, or I will have the marshal escort you out." Tomas glanced around the store, noting the several people who had stopped to watch the confrontation, all of them clearly on Zara's side. He forced a smile. "This is not over." "Yes, it is," Nancy said firmly. "You are not welcome here. Leave now." Tomas left, but the encounter left Zara shaking. Nancy locked the store door and made tea, sitting with Zara until she calmed down. "You should tell Cade," Nancy said. "He needs to know that man found you." "I know," Zara said. "I will." She drove back to the ranch with her nerves stretched tight, jumping at every shadow. When she arrived, Cade was in the barn, and she went straight to him, the need to see him, to feel safe, overwhelming everything else. "Cade," she said, and her voice broke on his name. He turned immediately, taking in her pale face and shaking hands. "What happened?" "Marcus's brother found me in town. He tried to convince me to go back." Cade's jaw tightened, and his eyes went hard in a way she had never seen. "Did he touch you?" "No, Nancy was there and other people. He left when he realized no one was going to help him." "Good." Cade took a breath, clearly trying to rein in his anger. "But he knows where you are now. He might come here." "I am sorry," Zara said, tears spilling over. "I have brought trouble to your door." "Hey, no." Cade stepped closer, his hands hovering near her shoulders but not touching, asking permission. "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault." Zara closed the distance, stepping into his arms, and Cade wrapped her in an embrace that was warm and strong and everything she needed. She pressed her face against his chest and cried, really cried, for the first time since leaving Santa Fe. She cried for the years she had lost, for the woman she had been before Marcus, for all the fear and pain and loneliness. And Cade just held her, one hand smoothing over her hair, his voice a low murmur of comfort. "You are safe. I will keep you safe. I promise." When the storm of tears passed, Zara pulled back slightly, looking up at him through damp lashes. "Why do you care so much? I am just someone you took in out of charity." "Is that what you think?" Cade asked, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Zara, I care because I am falling in love with you. I have been since the day you arrived, and I know I should have kept it to myself, should have let you heal without any pressure, but you asked and I will not lie to you." Zara's breath caught. "You love me." "I do. And if you do not feel the same, that is all right. I will still keep you safe. I will still be your friend. But I could not let you think you are a burden or a charity case. You are so much more than that." "I love you too," Zara whispered, and saying it felt like stepping off a cliff into open air, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "I did not think I could feel this way again, did not think I would ever trust anyone enough. But you have been so patient, so kind. You never pushed or demanded. You just gave me space to find myself again." Cade's smile was like the sunrise, slow and warm and full of light. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Zara rose on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, a question and an answer all at once. His lips were soft against hers, and there was no demand in the kiss, no expectation. It was simply a moment of connection, of two people choosing each other. When they pulled apart, Zara felt like she was glowing from the inside out. "I did not know it could be like this." "Like what?" "Gentle, safe. I thought love was supposed to hurt." "Not this love," Cade said, cupping her face in his hands. "Never this love." They stood in the barn, holding each other as the afternoon light slanted through the cracks in the walls, and for the first time in years, Zara felt truly at peace. But peace, she was learning, was something that had to be fought for and defended. 3 days later, Tomas returned, and this time he brought 2 other men with him. They rode up to the ranch in the middle of the afternoon, and Zara saw them coming from the kitchen window. "Cade," she called, and he was there immediately, stepping out onto the porch with Zara slightly behind him. Tomas reined in his horse and smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Mr. Irving, I presume. I am here for my brother's wife." "She does not want to go with you," Cade said evenly. "I suggest you turn around and ride back the way you came. She does not have a choice. She is married. She is also a grown woman who can make her own decisions, and she has decided to stay here." One of the men with Tomas shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun. Cade did not move, but his voice went cold. "I would not do that if I were you. This is Cherokee Nation land, and I have friends among the marshals. You draw that gun, and you will find yourself in a Cherokee court, and they do not look kindly on men who threaten women." Tomas's eyes narrowed. "Marcus is willing to pay for her return. She is not property to be bought and sold. $500. No, 1,000. You could offer me 10,000 and the answer would still be no. Zara stays here because she wants to, and there is nothing you or your brother can do about it." Tomas's face flushed with anger. "Marcus will not let this go. He will come himself. Let him come. The answer will be the same." Tomas stared at them for a long moment, then wheeled his horse around. "You have not heard the last of this," he called back as they rode away. When they were out of sight, Cade turned to Zara. "You are shaking." "I am angry," Zara said, and she was. The fear was still there, but beneath it was a white-hot rage. "I am so tired of men thinking they own me, that they can buy me or sell me or control me. I am a person, not a thing." "I know," Cade said, "and I am sorry you have to fight this battle at all, but you are not fighting it alone." True to Cade's word, he reached out to the Cherokee marshals, and they began keeping an eye on the ranch. One of them, a man named Samuel Blackfeather, came out to talk to Zara directly. He was kind but thorough, asking her questions about her marriage, about Marcus's behavior, about the laws in New Mexico territory where she had lived. "Here is the situation," Samuel said after he had gathered all the information. "Cherokee Nation law is sovereign here. Your husband has no legal standing to force you to return. However, if he comes onto this land and causes trouble, we can arrest him. The challenge is proving your case if he tries to take you back to New Mexico. We can help with that, but it would be easier if you were no longer legally married." "How would I do that?" Zara asked. "File for divorce. Cherokee Nation allows for it on grounds of abuse. You would need witnesses, but from what you have told me, there are people in Santa Fe who saw what he did to you. It would take time and money, but it would give you legal protection." Zara looked at Cade, who nodded encouragingly. "I will pay for it," he said, "whatever it costs. I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking, I am offering." Cade took her hand. "Let us end this properly so you can be truly free." So Zara filed for divorce, and Samuel Blackfeather helped her navigate the legal complexities. Letters were sent to Santa Fe, to the priest at the church where she had attended, to neighbors who had witnessed her bruises, to the doctor who had treated her broken wrist. Slowly, testimony came back, people willing to speak the truth about Marcus Navarro's brutality. Marcus himself did come, eventually, riding into Tahlequah in late November with bluster and threats. He found himself face to face with Cherokee marshals who were unimpressed by his claims and unmoved by his anger. When he tried to ride out to the ranch, he was turned back. When he tried to bribe officials, he was thrown in jail for 3 days. And when he finally realized that he was not going to win, that the law here protected Zara in ways the law in Santa Fe never had, he left, bitter and defeated. Zara did not feel victorious when she heard he was gone. She just felt tired and relieved. It was over. He could not touch her anymore. The divorce was finalized in January of 1885, on a cold day when the world was blanketed in snow. Zara stood in the Cherokee courthouse and listened as the judge declared her marriage dissolved. And when it was done, she walked out into the winter air feeling lighter than she had in years. Cade was waiting for her, stamping his feet to keep warm, and when he saw her face, he smiled. "How do you feel?" "Free," Zara said, and the word was not big enough to contain what she felt, but it was a start. "I feel free." He pulled her into his arms, right there on the courthouse steps, and kissed her soundly. Around them, people smiled and went about their business. Tahlequah was used to love stories, especially ones with happy endings. That night back at the ranch, Cade built up the fire and they sat together on the worn settee, Zara tucked against his side. "What do you want now?" he asked. "Now that you are free, what do you want for your future?" Zara thought about it. 6 months ago, she would have said she just wanted to survive. But now, with Cade's arm around her and the fire crackling and the certain knowledge that she was safe, she wanted more than survival. "I want a life," she said slowly. "I want to wake up in the morning and not be afraid. I want to laugh and make plans and know that tomorrow will be better than today." She paused. "And I want you if you will have me." "I will always have you," Cade said, his voice rough with emotion, "for as long as you will let me. What if that is forever? Then I will be the luckiest man alive." They were married in March, in a small ceremony at the church in Tahlequah with Nancy and John Swimmer standing as witnesses. Zara wore a simple dress of cream-colored wool that Nancy had helped her make, and Cade wore his best suit, the one he had bought for his first wedding and never thought he would need again. The ceremony was brief, the words traditional, but when Cade slipped the ring on Zara's finger and promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, she believed him with every fiber of her being. The reception was held at the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson having insisted on providing the food. Half the town turned out, people who had come to know and respect Zara in the months she had been there. They brought gifts, practical things like quilts and dishes and preserves, and they offered their congratulations with genuine warmth. As the evening wore on and the party began to wind down, Cade took Zara's hand and led her outside. The stars were bright overhead, and the air smelled of spring, of new growth and fresh beginnings. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I am," Zara said, and it was the simple truth. "I did not think I would ever be happy again, but I am." "Good, because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." They went home to the ranch, to the house that had become their home, and for the first time Zara went into Cade's room instead of her own. He was gentle with her, patient and careful, and he showed her that love could be tender, that touch could heal rather than harm. And when she cried afterward, he held her and understood that they were tears of release, of joy, of gratitude for having found each other against all odds. Life settled into a new rhythm, one built on partnership and love. Zara took on more responsibilities around the ranch, learning to manage the books and handle the business side of things. She was good at it, and the ranch began to prosper under their joint management. Cade hired a couple of hands to help with the heavy work, young men from town who were glad for the steady employment and treated Zara with unfailing respect. The ranch itself grew. They bought more cattle, improved the breeding stock, and built a new barn to replace the old one that was starting to sag. They added chickens and pigs, and Zara's kitchen garden expanded until it was large enough to supply vegetables not just for them, but to sell in town. In the summer of 1886, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Cade one evening after supper, her hands twisting in her apron with nervousness. "I am going to have a baby." Cade's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, wonder, and finally pure happiness. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Yes." He let out a whoop and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are going to be parents," he said, setting her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "I am going to be a father. Are you happy about it?" "Happy." "Zara, I am over the moon. I am walking on air. I am the happiest man in the entire territory." He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her tenderly. "Thank you." "I did not do it alone," she pointed out, smiling. "True enough. But still, thank you. The pregnancy was not easy." Zara was sick for the first few months, and there were days when she could barely keep anything down. But Cade was there every step of the way, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, rubbing her back when she ached, and never once complaining about the extra work he had to take on because she was not feeling well. As her belly grew, so did Cade's protectiveness. He fussed over her constantly, worrying about her doing too much, and Zara found it both exasperating and endearing. "I am pregnant, not made of porcelain," she would say, but she appreciated his care nonetheless. The baby came in February of 1887, during a snowstorm that seemed determined to rival the one from 2 years before. Zara's labor was long and hard, and there were moments when she thought she could not go on. But Cade was there, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, and when the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced baby boy in her arms, Zara felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that it took her breath away. "A son," Cade said, his voice thick with tears. "We have a son." They named him James, after Cade's grandfather, and he had his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was perfect. The first year of James's life was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. There were sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, and moments of sheer panic when he cried, and they could not figure out why. But there were also moments of pure joy, like the first time he smiled, the first time he laughed, the first time he reached for Cade and said something that sounded almost like "da." Zara discovered that motherhood suited her. She was patient and nurturing, and she sang to James in Spanish, songs her own mother had sung to her. Cade was a natural father, gentle and playful, and watching him with their son made Zara fall in love with him all over again. The ranch continued to thrive. Cade's reputation as a fair and honest rancher spread, and he began to get contracts to supply beef to towns throughout the Cherokee Nation and beyond. The money was good, and they were able to make improvements, adding a proper parlor to the house and buying furniture that was not second-hand or makeshift. In 1889, Zara became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she carried through the summer and into the fall without much trouble. The baby, another boy they named Thomas, was born in October on a crisp autumn day when the leaves were turning gold and red. James, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby brother and wanted to help with everything. "Gentle," Zara would remind him as he patted Thomas's head with pudgy hands, and James would nod solemnly and try his best. Life was good. No, life was better than good. It was everything Zara had never dared to hope for. She had a husband who loved her without reservation, 2 healthy sons, a home that was truly hers, and a future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. One evening when James was 4 and Thomas was 2, Zara and Cade sat on the porch watching the boys play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and the air was warm with the promise of summer. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not left?" Cade asked quietly. Zara shuddered. "I try not to, but sometimes I do, and I realize that I would probably be dead by now, or so broken that I might as well be." Cade reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I am so glad you left, so glad you found your way here. I am too. You saved my life, you know, in every way that matters." "You saved mine too," Cade said. "I was just going through the motions before you came. Working, sleeping, existing but not really living. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. You gave me a family, a purpose, a future worth looking forward to." Zara squeezed his hand. "We saved each other then. I suppose we did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their sons, and Zara thought about the long road that had brought her here. The pain and fear, the desperate flight, the terrifying uncertainty of those first days in Tahlequah. And then Cade, with his quiet strength and patient love, giving her space to heal, never rushing, never demanding, just being there, steady as a rock, until she was whole enough to love him back. She had arrived broken, shattered into so many pieces she had not thought they could ever be reassembled. But Cade had not tried to fix her. He had simply loved her, and in the warmth of that love, she had fixed herself. She had found her own strength, her own voice, her own worth. And then she had chosen him, not because she needed him to survive, but because she wanted him, because he made her life richer and fuller and more joyful. That was the miracle, she thought. Not that he had saved her, but that he had given her the space and time to save herself. As the years passed, the ranch grew into one of the most successful operations in the region. James and Thomas grew into strong, capable young men who worked alongside their father and treated their mother with the respect and love she deserved. Zara became a pillar of the community, known for her generosity and her willingness to help other women who found themselves in situations like hers had been. She and Nancy Swimmer started an informal network, helping women escape abusive situations and find safe places to land. In 1895, Zara and Cade celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Their sons, now 8 and 6, had made cards and picked wildflowers, and they had a family dinner with all of Zara's favorite foods. After the boys were in bed, Cade and Zara sat on the porch, as they often did, watching the stars. 10 years, Zara said softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. I know what you mean. I cannot really remember what my life was like before you. Cade pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Do you have any regrets? Not a single one, do you? Only that I did not meet you sooner. Think of all the years we could have had. We have the years we have, Zara said, and I would not change a moment of them because they made us who we are. You are a wise woman, Zara Irving. I learned from the best. They sat together as the night deepened around them. Two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, when they both needed it most. The love between them had started as a fragile thing, tentative and careful, but over the years it had grown into something strong and unshakable, a foundation on which they had built a life worth living. In 1898, tragedy struck when John Swimmer passed away suddenly. Nancy was devastated, and Zara spent weeks helping her friend through the grief, managing the store and making sure Nancy ate and slept. It was Cade who suggested that Nancy come live with them on the ranch, in a small cottage they would build for her, and Nancy accepted gratefully. The cottage went up quickly, and Nancy moved in by summer. She brought her knowledge of plants and healing, and she taught Zara even more about herbs and remedies. In return, Zara made sure Nancy never felt alone, including her in family meals and celebrations, and Nancy became a beloved grandmother figure to James and Thomas. As the century turned and 1900 arrived, Zara looked back on the 16 years since she had stepped off that stagecoach in Tahlequah and marveled at how much her life had changed. She was 40 years old now, and Cade was 47, and they had built something beautiful together. Their sons were growing into fine young men. James, at 13, was already nearly as tall as his father and showed a gift for working with horses. Thomas, at 11, was quieter and more studious, fascinated by the business side of the ranch and already helping Zara with the books. The ranch employed 10 full-time hands now, and during peak seasons, even more. They had expanded into horse breeding as well as cattle, and Cade's horses were known throughout the territory for their quality and temperament. The house had been expanded twice, and they now had a proper dining room, a library, and upstairs bedrooms for the boys. But the best part, the part that mattered most to Zara, was that it was filled with love. Their home was a place of laughter and safety, where people felt welcome and valued. It was everything her childhood home had been before she married Marcus, and everything her marriage to Marcus had never been. One spring evening in 1902, as Zara was preparing supper, James came into the kitchen looking nervous. "Ma, can I talk to you about something?" "Of course. What is it?" "There is a girl in town. Her name is Emily Patterson. She is Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter visiting from Kansas. I met her at church and I would like to call on her properly. I wanted to ask your permission first." Zara smiled, her heart squeezing with both joy and a touch of sadness. Her little boy was growing up. "How old is Emily?" 15, same as me." "And you think you might care for her?" James blushed. "I think I do, Ma. She is smart and funny, and she does not act like I am foolish when I talk about wanting to breed horses. She listens." "That is important in a partner," Zara said, thinking of Cade. "The ability to really listen. Of course you have my permission, and I am sure your father will give his as well. But James, remember to be respectful and never push. If she says no to something, you accept that. Do you understand?" "Yes, Ma, I understand." Zara pulled her son into a hug. "I am proud of you. You are growing into a fine man." James called on Emily Patterson throughout that summer, and by fall it was clear to everyone that they were smitten with each other. Emily was a sweet girl with auburn hair and green eyes, and she fit into the family easily. Cade approved, Nancy approved, and most importantly, Emily made James happy. In 1904, when James was 17 and Emily was 16. They married in a ceremony that brought together families from across the Cherokee Nation. It was a joyous celebration, and Zara cried happy tears as she watched her son promise to love and cherish his bride, knowing that he meant every word. James and Emily built a house on the far end of the ranch property, and James took over more and more of the day-to-day operations. Cade was more than ready to step back a bit, to spend more time with Zara and Thomas and Nancy. He was 51 now, and while he was still strong and capable, he was content to let the next generation take the lead. Thomas, meanwhile, had shown no interest in romance yet. He was focused on learning everything he could about running a business, and he spent hours with Zara going over the books and discussing contracts and negotiations. "I want to make this place even bigger," he told her once. "I want the Irving Ranch to be known throughout the whole country." "You have the vision for it," Zara said, "and the head. Just remember that people matter more than profits. Take care of the people who work for you and they will take care of the business." "I will, Ma. I promise." In 1906, James and Emily welcomed their first child, a little girl they named Zara Nancy, and Zara became a grandmother. Holding that tiny baby in her arms, seeing her son so happy and in love, was a moment of such profound joy that Zara could barely breathe. "Thank you," she whispered to Cade that night as they lay in bed. "Thank you for giving me this life." "Thank you for sharing it with me," Cade replied and kissed her forehead. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Thomas eventually did marry, at the age of 23, to a schoolteacher named Rebecca, who was every bit as smart and capable as he was. They settled in Tahlequah, where Thomas opened an office to manage the ranch's business affairs and began investing in other ventures as well. James and Emily had 3 more children, 2 boys and another girl, and the big house on the ranch rang with the laughter of grandchildren. Zara threw herself into being a grandmother, teaching the children to read and sewing clothes for their dolls, and telling them stories about the old days. Nancy Swimmer lived to the impressive age of 87, passing peacefully in her sleep in 1912. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched, and Zara mourned her friend deeply, but also celebrated the long, full life she had lived. In 1914, Cade and Zara celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. They were 61 and 68 now, both of them slowed by age but still active and engaged with life. Their family had grown large, with 4 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, and the ranch was thriving under James's management. They threw a big party, inviting everyone they knew, and the celebration lasted well into the night. People gave speeches, telling stories about Cade and Zara, about their kindness and generosity, about the way they had built not just a successful ranch but a legacy of love and community. When it was finally over and everyone had gone home, Cade and Zara sat on their porch one more time in the rocking chairs that had been there since the beginning. 30 years, Zara said. "It has been a good 30 years. The best," Cade agreed. He reached over and took her hand, and they sat like that for a long time, not needing to speak, just being together. Zara thought about the frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Tahlequah so many years ago, carrying nothing but a carpet bag and a heart full of hurt. She thought about how Cade had given her space to heal, how he had never rushed or demanded, how he had simply loved her until she was strong enough to love him back. And she thought about all the years that had followed, the laughter and tears, the triumphs and struggles, all of it woven together into a life worth living. "I love you," she said, squeezing his hand. "I love you too," Cade said. "Always have, always will." They sat together as the stars came out, two people who had weathered storms and found safe harbor in each other, and they were content. In 1920, Cade passed away in his sleep at the age of 74. He had lived a long, full life, and he died peacefully, surrounded by family. Zara mourned him deeply, but she also knew that she had been blessed beyond measure to have him for 35 years of marriage and 37 years of knowing him. She lived for another 8 years, dying in 1928 at the age of 75. She was buried next to Cade on a hilltop overlooking the ranch, and the whole community turned out for her funeral. People spoke of her strength, her compassion, her wisdom, and the way she had helped so many women find their own paths to freedom and healing. But perhaps the greatest testament to Zara and Cade's love was the family they left behind. James and Emily continued to run the ranch, teaching their children the same values of hard work, kindness, and respect that they had learned from Cade and Zara. Thomas and Rebecca's business ventures brought prosperity not just to the family but to the whole region, and they used their wealth generously, funding schools and hospitals and programs to help those in need. The Irving name became synonymous with integrity and compassion, and it all traced back to a frightened woman who had arrived broken, and a patient cowboy who had helped her heal with a love that never rushed or demanded. And every generation of Irvings that followed learned the story of how it all began, how their family's legacy was built not on land or money or power, but on the simple, profound act of loving someone enough to let them find their own way back to wholeness. That was the lesson Zara and Cade had left behind, and it was a lesson that would echo through the years, shaping lives and hearts for generations to come. The ranch still stands today, though it has changed much over the decades.